We died when the sensors went dark. I believed we could escape. Now I know the hulk was already digesting us. The moment our frigate entered its gravity well, we became food. Not for creatures or daemons, but for the ship itself. A space hulk doesn't just trap vessels. It consumes them, integrates them, makes them part of something ancient and hungry and impossibly alive. My name was Lieutenant Kavrin Thale. I served the Emperor aboard the Undaunted Valor. That service ended the day we mistook a predator for salvage. I was monitoring the sensory station when the anomaly appeared on our auger arrays. 1800 hours, 7 minutes into the gamma shift. The Undaunted Valor had been on patrol for 43 days in the Jericho Reach, tracking scattered reports of Xenos activity along the spinward trade routes. Routine work, the kind that numbs the mind and makes you careless. The contact signature materialized at extreme range. Massive, far too massive for any Imperial vessel. Too large even for the Xenos battleships we'd been hunting. I remember the exact moment the cogitator finished its analysis. My hands went cold inside my gloves. The temperature on the bridge hadn't changed, but I felt ice crystallize in my veins. "Captain," I said, keeping my voice level through years of naval discipline. Long-range augers are detecting an unidentified object at bearing 273 Mark 9. Distance approximately 8 million kilometers. Mass readings are... I paused, checking the display again. The numbers couldn't be correct. "Sir, mass readings indicate an object between 12 and 15 cubic kilometers in volume." Captain Varkoth stood from his command throne, his augmetic eye whirring as it focused on the tactical display. He was a veteran of 30 years' service, a man who'd survived boarding actions against Orc raiders and fleet engagements against Chaos renegades. I'd never seen him uncertain. Until that moment. "Verify those readings, Lieutenant," he ordered. I ran the scan sequence 3 more times. Each pass confirmed the previous data. Something enormous hung in the void ahead of us. Something that had no right to exist in this empty stretch of space. We were 6 days from the nearest Imperial outpost, 2 weeks from any major shipping lane. Nothing this large should be here. "Readings verified, sir. Object is stationary relative to local space. No engine signatures detected. No life support emissions. No Vox responses across any Imperial frequencies." I adjusted the auger sensitivity, pushing our sensors to their maximum range. New data scrolled across my screen. "Sir, I'm detecting multiple discrete mass concentrations within the larger object. It appears to be composed of numerous smaller vessels in close proximity." "A fleet?" asked Commander Helm, our executive officer. She moved closer to the tactical display, her scarred face illuminated by its pale green glow. "Negative, Commander. The vessels aren't maintaining formation. They're..." I struggled for the right word. "Interconnected, merged together. Some of the hull signatures match Imperial patterns. Gothic-class elements, merchant vessel profiles, patterns I don't recognize, and Xenos configurations. Multiple Xenos configurations." The bridge fell silent except for the omnipresent hum of the ship's systems and the distant drone of the plasma drives. Every officer present understood what I was describing. There was only one thing in the galaxy that fit this profile. "Emperor's mercy," whispered Helm. "It's a space hulk." Captain Varkoth's jaw tightened. His natural eye met his augmetic one in a strange moment of internal conflict, the human part of him warring with the mechanical. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decision that would doom us all. "Helm, reduce speed to 1/4. Maintain current heading. All stations, battle stations. Lieutenant Thale, I want continuous sensor sweeps. Commander Helm, prepare boarding parties. Tech Priest Magos. Ven, you're with me." I should have spoken then. Should have reminded the captain of the regulations. Space hulks were to be reported immediately to the nearest Adeptus Mechanicus facility. Expeditions required specialized teams, full company strength at minimum, proper equipment for hostile environments, and unknown threats. A single frigate with a crew of 200 souls had no business approaching such a thing. But I said nothing. None of us did. Because we all knew what the captain was thinking. A space hulk represented salvage rights beyond imagination. Ancient technology lost for millennia. Standard template. Construct fragments that could revolutionize entire forge worlds. Archaeological treasures from before the Age of Strife. Ships from the Great Crusade itself, bearing weapons and systems no longer manufactured. One significant find could secure promotions for the entire command staff, could write our names into naval records, could make us legends. Greed is a simple sin. Efficient, universal. It killed us as surely as any weapon. As we closed the distance over the next 6 hours, our sensors resolved more details. The space hulk was enormous beyond my initial estimates, closer to 20 cubic kilometers once we accounted for the irregular geometry. Dozens of ships locked together in a grotesque sculpture of metal and void-hardened debris. I identified at least 30 distinct vessels in the outer layers alone. There was a section of an Astartes battle barge, its proud prow sheared away and welded to the stern of an ancient merchant hauler. 3 system defense monitors clustered around what appeared to be a pre-imperial colony ship, its design predating current imperial naval architecture by thousands of years. Orc rocks formed tumorous growths along one flank, something that might have been Eldar once, though twisted and broken beyond certain identification. And things I couldn't identify at all. Vessels from civilizations that no longer existed, or perhaps never existed in our reality. The architecture shouldn't have fit together. The ships came from different eras, different technologies, different species, yet they were fused with impossible precision, as if some vast intelligence had carefully positioned each component. Corridors from Imperial vessels lined up with passages in Xenos craft. Power conduits ran between ships that had been constructed millennia apart. It was deliberate, purposeful, wrong. Magos Ven, said Captain Varkoth. Analysis. The tech priest moved with the clicking precision of his augmetic legs, mechadendrites extending from his back to interface with the ship's systems. His face, what remained of it beneath bionics, showed no expression. But his remaining organic eye held something like hunger. Blessed readings indicate the holy machine spirits sleep, Lord Captain, Ven intoned in his mechanical voice. The vessel congregation shows no active power generation. Residual energy signatures consistent with dormancy period of approximately 300 years standard. However, he paused, his mechadendrites twitching. However, there exist anomalous readings. Fluctuations in the local magnetic field, minor gravitic distortions, and the structural fusion points display evidence of recent activity. Define recent, said Helm sharply. Within the last solar week, by degradation analysis of the ionized particles at the weld points. The bridge's temperature seemed to drop another degree. A space hulk that had been dormant for 3 centuries didn't suddenly start welding itself together. Not unless something had activated it. Not unless something lived inside. Life signs? Demanded Varkoth. I ran the scan sequence again, pushing our augers deep into the hulk's interior. The returns made no sense. Sir, I'm detecting contradictory readings. Biosigns consistent with human patterns, but also Xenos, multiple Xenos species, and something else. The auger keeps classifying and reclassifying the same contacts. It's as if whatever is inside keeps changing, or the readings are being distorted by some form of interference. Genestealers, said Helm grimly. Has to be. They nest in these things. Use them as transport between systems. Possibly, Commander. But the reading patterns don't match standard Genestealer biological signatures. These are different. Varkoth studied the tactical display for a long moment, his augmetic eye cycling through different visual spectrums. Finally, he straightened. Decision made. We proceed with the boarding operation, but carefully. I want full armsmen, complements, hazard suits, and heavy weapons. Commander Helm, you'll lead the expedition. Take Magos Ven and his tech adepts. Lieutenant Thale, you're assigned as sensory specialist. I want constant monitoring of any environmental changes or threat indicators. Sir, I began, knowing I should protest, knowing I should invoke any regulation that might prevent this. But Varkoth's expression stopped me. This wasn't a captain making a military decision. This was a man seeing his chance at glory and refusing to let it pass. Nothing I said would matter. Prepare for approach, Lieutenant. That's an order. I sealed my uniform collar and began the pre-deployment checklist. Around me, the bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, but I noticed small tells. The weapons officer's hands trembled slightly. The helmsman kept glancing at the main viewport as if expecting something to appear. We were afraid, all of us, but we were also Imperial Navy. We had our orders. The Undaunted Valor crept forward at minimum thrust, our void shields raised and weapons charged despite the Hulk's apparent dormancy. At 1 million kilometers, I detected the first anomaly. The Space Hulk's position had shifted. Not by much, just 3,000 kilometers from its previous coordinates. But it should have been absolutely stationary. Dead ships in vacuum don't move without cause. Captain, the target has changed position. Drift? Asked Varkoth. No, sir. The movement was too uniform, too controlled. Sir, I think it. The second anomaly hit before I could finish. Our augers went wild, displaying contacts that appeared and disappeared faster than the cogitators could process. The Space Hulk wasn't empty. It was full of life. Hundreds of signatures. Thousands, concentrated in the deeper sections, moving through the interconnected vessels like blood through veins. Contact. Multiple contacts throughout the target. Sir, I'm reading massive life sign concentrations in reality twisted. I felt it before the instruments registered it. A sensation like the universe folding in on itself. My stomach lurched. The lights flickered. And the Space Hulk moved again, not drifting, rotating. Sections of its massive bulk unfolding like a flower opening to sunlight, revealing interior spaces that shouldn't exist, that violated the physical dimensions of the component ships. Emergency thrust! Get us out of here! Varkoth's composure finally broke, his voice cracking with sudden understanding of what we'd approached. The helmsman slammed thrust controls to maximum. The Undaunted Valor's engines screamed. Ancient plasma drives pushed beyond safe limits. We began to pull away. For 3 seconds, I thought we might escape. 3 seconds of hope before the laws of physics bent around us. The gravity well appeared without warning. Our sensors detected it simultaneously with our bodies. Artificial gravity, but impossibly strong, impossibly focused. It didn't pull on the entire ship uniformly. Instead, it grabbed us selectively, seizing structural weak points and dragging us sideways through space toward the now opening maw of the Space Hulk's interior. We're caught. Gravity, field, strength, increasing exponentially. The helmsman's voice rose to a shout. Engines at 120%. No effect. We're not breaking free. Magos Ven. Can you? The field is not natural, Lord Captain. Ven's mechadendrites flailed in agitation. It demonstrates selectivity impossible in gravitonic phenomena. It is choosing what to pull. This is not physics. This is will. The Space Hulk continued its grotesque unfurling. Sections that had been solid metal peeled apart like flesh, revealing a docking bay large enough to swallow 3 Imperial frigates, cathedral-sized and wrong. The interior glowed with dim light that came from no visible source. And I saw other ships inside, dozens of them. Some Imperial, some Xenos. All positioned with that same terrible precision I'd noticed earlier. "Navigator," screamed Varkoth. "Emergency warp translation. Get us into the immaterium." From the navigator's sanctum came a sound I'd never heard from one of those psychers. A scream of pure terror, quickly cut off. Then her voice over the vox, tight with panic. "I cannot, Captain. I cannot see the warp. Something is blocking my sight. The Astronomicon is gone. We are alone. We are..." Her words dissolved into static. The Undaunted Valor crossed the threshold into the Space Hulk's docking bay. The moment we passed through that opening, everything changed. Power systems crashed. Main lights died. Emergency lumens struggled to activate, their red glow barely pushing back the sudden darkness. The temperature plummeted, dropping from standard shipboard 22 Celsius to near freezing in seconds. Frost formed on metal surfaces. And worst of all, the gravity shifted. Not failed, shifted. We were no longer operating under our ship's internal gravity generators. Something else, some external force, dictated how physics worked in this space. I felt the direction of down change, rotate, stabilize in a new orientation perpendicular to the ship's deck. Around us, massive doors ground shut. Not normal ship doors. Something vast and ancient, more like geological formations than manufactured systems. The sound of metal scraping against metal resonated through our hull, transmitted through the very structure of our ship directly to our bones. It lasted for 23 seconds. When it finally stopped, we sat in absolute silence. The Space Hulk had closed its mouth. And we were inside. "Damage report." Varkoth's voice barely rose above a whisper. Reports came in from all sections. Main power offline. Warp drive compromised. Multiple hull breaches in the aft sections. Life support functioning on emergency reserves. Casualty reports. 17 dead from the gravity shift. Another 8 injured. And we were trapped in a space that shouldn't exist, aboard a ship that had just proven it could hunt. Through the viewport, I saw the other vessels positioned around us. Silent, dark. Some showed Imperial markings I recognized. Others bore insignia from chapters and regiments I'd only encountered in historical records, and their positions formed a pattern. Like organs in a body, like components in a vast machine. Each one placed exactly where it needed to be to serve some incomprehensible function. The Undaunted Valor settled into its new position with a final shudder. And in that moment, I understood the truth. This wasn't a collection of debris. This was something alive, something aware, something that had just finished swallowing us whole. The emergency lumens cast everything in shades of red and black, transforming the bridge into something from a nightmare. I watched Captain Varkoth's face cycle through expressions I'd never seen on him before. Confusion, fear, and then, desperately, a return to military protocol. When the world stops making sense, you cling to what you know. Orders, procedures, the comfortable lie of control. All stations, status reports, now. His voice had regained some of its command authority, though I heard the strain beneath it. The reports came in fragments, punctuated by static and strange distortions in the Vox system. The main generatorium had gone into emergency shutdown during the gravity shift. Engineering crews were attempting to restart secondary power systems, but the ship's machine spirits were unresponsive. The warp drive had sustained catastrophic damage when the navigator lost her connection to the Astronomicon. Structural integrity was compromised in sections 7 through 12. Hull breaches were being sealed, but we'd lost atmosphere in 3 cargo holds and the aft crew quarters, and we were completely immobile. The engines wouldn't respond, not because they were damaged, but because something was preventing them from firing. When the engineering officer attempted a manual ignition sequence, the plasma drives cycled through their startup routine and simply stopped. No failure warnings, no error codes. They just refused to function. Magos Ven, said Varkoth, his augmetic eye fixed on the tech priest. Ven's mechadendrites twitched in patterns I'd learned to recognize as distress. His remaining organic eye had dilated fully, and a thin line of blood ran from his nose, bright against his pale, augmented skin. When he spoke, his usually monotone voice carried an edge of something I'd never heard from a tech priest before. Wonder mixed with horror. The machine spirits are afraid, Lord Captain. They sense presence, communion. Something is speaking to them in languages older than Mars, in binary cant that predates the Omnissiah's codification. The ship's systems are not malfunctioning. They are being overridden, commanded, dominated by a will that supersedes our authority. You're telling me something is controlling the Undaunted Valor. I am telling you, Lord Captain, that your vessel no longer fully belongs to you. The Space Hulk is claiming it. Slowly, systematically, like a predator injecting venom to paralyze its prey before consumption. The temperature continued to drop. I pulled my uniform jacket tighter, but it did nothing against the cold that seemed to seep through the very walls. This wasn't the clean cold of void exposure. This was something else. Something that carried the weight of age and emptiness and vast, patient hunger. Lieutenant Thale. Sensor status. I turned to my station, grateful for something concrete to focus on. But what I saw on the displays made my hands freeze over the controls. Sir, our augers are detecting power fluctuations throughout the Space Hulk. Not from the ships themselves, but from something connecting them, like a nervous system activating. The energy signatures are spreading, section by section, ship by ship. Is something powering up? No, sir. It's more like something waking up. Commander Helm moved to stand beside the captain's throne, her scarred face set in grim lines. We need to evacuate. Get the crew into survival pods and hope someone picks up our distress beacon before... Before what, Commander? Varkoth's voice cut sharp. Before we freeze in the void? Before we're captured by whoever comes to investigate and executed for losing an Imperial vessel? Before we die slowly in survival pods designed for 3 days of life support? He shook his head. No. We secure the ship. We assess the situation, and we find a way out. I admired his determination, even as I recognized its futility. The bridge viewport offered a clear view of the docking bay around us. The space was vast enough to swallow a dozen frigates. Its walls formed from the hulls of ancient vessels welded together with such precision that the seams were barely visible. And those walls were moving. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, but moving, shifting, adjusting, like the interior of a living thing accommodating a newly swallowed meal. The other ships positioned around us remained dark and silent. I counted 17 vessels, ranging from small escort craft to what appeared to be a heavy cruiser with lance arrays still intact. Some bore imperial markings, others carried the insignia of Xenos empires, and several displayed symbols I didn't recognize at all, rendered in styles that suggested they'd been sailing the void before humanity reached the stars. Captain, I said slowly, watching my sensor displays update with new data. I'm detecting life signs aboard the other vessels. Faint, intermittent, but present. Survivors? Asked Helm, with something like hope. I don't know, Commander. The signatures are wrong. They appear and disappear. Sometimes human, sometimes Xenos, sometimes both simultaneously, which should be impossible. And they're all concentrated in specific sections. Engineering, command decks, life support. As if they're maintaining the ships. Varkoth stared at the viewport, his jaw working. Or being used to maintain them. Magos, your assessment. The organic components of captured vessels would provide useful biomass for system integration, Ven said clinically. If the Space Hulk has developed emergent consciousness as some theoretical frameworks suggest possible, it would require maintenance for its composite systems. Biological components are self-repairing, adaptable, and more resistant to warp exposure than pure mechanical systems. It would be logical to preserve and utilize them. "You're describing slavery," said Helm. "I am describing resource optimization, Commander. Morality is a human construct. The Omnissiah's machine spirits operate according to function and efficiency." "Enough." Varkoth raised a hand. "Philosophy won't get us out of here. Lieutenant Thale, continue monitoring all sensor data. I want to know immediately if anything changes. Commander Helm, assemble your boarding teams. If there are survivors on those other ships, they might have information we can use, and they might know a way out." "Sir, with respect, that's exactly what got us into this situation. Then we've already made our mistake, Commander. Now we live with the consequences." He turned to face the bridge crew, his natural eye sweeping across each station. "All hands, this is the captain. We have experienced catastrophic system failures and are currently trapped within a hostile environment. I will not lie to you. Our situation is grave, but we are Imperial Navy. We have survived worse than this. We will establish control over our ship. We will gather intelligence, and we will find our escape route. The Emperor protects those who take action, so we will act." The speech was hollow. We all knew it, but it gave the crew something to hold on to, and sometimes that's enough to keep people functional for a few more hours. Over the next 3 hours, as emergency power was partially restored and systems were slowly brought back online, I watched the Space Hulk wake up around us. That's the only way I can describe it. The power signatures I'd detected earlier spread like blood returning to dormant limbs. Sections that had been dark for centuries suddenly showed energy readings. Corridors long sealed by vacuum or structural damage began equalizing pressure. Ancient systems clicked and hummed to life throughout the vast amalgamation. And the sounds began. At first, they were barely audible through the hull. Distant creaks and groans that could have been thermal expansion or structural settling. But they grew louder, more distinct. Metal scraping against metal, the hiss of atmosphere filling empty spaces, and something else, something rhythmic, like breathing, like a vast heartbeat pulsing through the merged vessels. The crew heard it too. I saw them glancing nervously at the walls, at the deck, at each other. Fear is contagious in confined spaces. It spreads faster than any disease, more completely than any doctrine. And we were all infected. Commander Helm assembled her boarding party in the main hangar bay. 12 armsmen in full void carapace armor, equipped with lasguns, shotguns, and 2 heavy flamers. A tech priest named Corvus to handle any mechanical obstacles. And myself, carrying portable sensor equipment and trying very hard not to think about what we might encounter. Sergeant Karras commanded the armsmen detail. She was Cadian-born, a veteran of 5 years naval service after surviving the fall of her homeworld. If anyone could keep a boarding party alive in hostile territory, it was her. She checked each soldier's equipment with mechanical precision, her scarred hands moving with the efficiency of someone who'd performed this ritual 1,000 times. "Listen well," she addressed the assembled armsmen. "We're not entering a ship. We're entering dozens of ships. Different layouts, different atmospheres, different gravity. Stay close, watch your corners. Shoot anything that isn't Imperial and doesn't identify itself immediately. This is not a rescue mission. This is reconnaissance. We gather information and return. Understood?" "Yes, Sergeant," came the unified response. I sealed my void suit and checked the portable Auspex unit one final time. The device was designed for close-range scanning, capable of detecting life signs, atmospheric composition, radiation levels, and structural integrity within a 50-meter radius. It felt woefully inadequate for what we were about to attempt. "Ready, Lieutenant?" Helm stood beside me, her own void suit marked with the commander's insignia. "As much as I'll ever be, ma'am." "Good, because you're our eyes in there. Anything looks wrong, anything feels wrong, you tell me immediately. I don't care if it seems insignificant. This place has already proven it doesn't follow normal rules." The boarding ramp extended from the Undaunted Valor's primary airlock, stretching across 20 meters of empty space to connect with the hull of the nearest captured vessel. A merchantman, based on the hull configuration visible through the viewport. Gothic class, maybe 200 years old, scorched by weapons fire along its port side. Through the blackened viewports, I saw only darkness. We crossed the boarding ramp in single file, mag boots keeping us anchored as we moved through the pressurized tube. The temperature inside my suit read -15 Celsius, cold enough that my breath fogged the inside of my helmet, cold enough that exposed skin would freeze in minutes. The merchant ship's outer airlock still functioned. Tech Priest Corvus interfaced with its control panel, his mechadendrites snaking into access ports. After several seconds, the mechanism groaned to life. Ancient hydraulics protested, metal scraping against ice that had formed in the seals. But the door opened, revealing an airlock chamber beyond. We filed inside. 12 armsmen, 1 tech priest, 1 commander, 1 sensory officer. 15 souls entering the belly of something we didn't understand. The outer door sealed behind us with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Then the inner door cycled open. Atmosphere rushed past us, carrying a smell that made me gag inside my helmet. Decay. Not the clean vacuum-preserved decay of bodies in void, but active rot. Biological breakdown that required air and warmth and time. My auspex immediately began screaming warnings. Atmospheric composition was wrong. Oxygen levels too high. Nitrogen too low. And traces of methane, ammonia, and organic compounds that shouldn't exist in a sealed environment. "Atmosphere is breathable but toxic," I reported. "Keep your helmets sealed. Extended exposure would cause chemical burns to the respiratory system." "Noted," said Helm. "Advance." The merchantman's corridors were wrong. I'd studied Imperial ship layouts during my officer training. Gothic-class merchants followed standard templates. Hab sections here, cargo holds here, engineering there. Life support systems in predictable locations. This vessel matched those templates in its overall structure, but the details were corrupted. Bulkheads had been removed, creating spaces that violated the original design. New corridors had been cut through walls, connecting sections that were meant to be separate. And everywhere, additions. Cables and pipes ran along the walls and ceilings, some clearly Imperial manufacture, others Xenos in origin, all interconnected in impossible ways. We advanced through 3 decks, following the path that seemed most stable according to my auspex readings. Each corridor looked like the last. Each junction offered multiple choices, none obviously better than the others. The ship had become a maze. In a section that might once have been crew quarters, we found the first bodies. 3 merchant sailors, still wearing the remnants of their uniforms, collapsed against a wall. They'd been dead for years based on the decay, but the preservation was inconsistent. Of the bodies were mummified. Others looked fresh, as if different sections had died at different times. Sergeant Karras examined them with clinical efficiency. No obvious cause of death. No wounds. No signs of violence or struggle. They just sat down and died. "Look at their hands," I said, my auspex detecting something my eyes had missed. She turned one body slightly. The sailor's hands were fused to the wall, not by fire or adhesive, but merged. The flesh had somehow bonded with the metal, blending seamlessly from organic to inorganic. I saw bone structure extending into the bulkhead circuitry. saw blood vessels that transitioned into power cables. "Emperor's throne," whispered one of the armsmen. "The integration process," said Tech Priest Corvus with disturbing calm. "The Space Hulk requires biological components for system maintenance. It preserves what it needs and discards the rest. These individuals failed to provide adequate utility. They were terminated and left as warnings or possibly as materials for later reclamation. They were people," Helm said sharply. "They were resources that became waste. The distinction is semantic, Commander." We moved deeper into the merchantman, following corridors that should have led to the engineering section. My auspex showed power readings ahead. Strong readings. Something in this ship was still active. The sounds grew louder as we approached. That rhythmic pulse I'd heard from our bridge, now unmistakable. A heartbeat, mechanical and biological together, synchronized in a rhythm that made my chest ache with sympathetic response. The engineering deck doors stood open, revealing a sight that stopped us all mid-step. The chamber beyond was no longer recognizable as an Imperial engineering bay. The plasma reactors remained, but they'd been modified, enhanced, integrated with systems from a dozen different technologies, and around them, throughout them, grew something organic. Not plant matter, not flesh exactly. Something else. Crystalline structures with veins, metallic growths that pulsed with bioluminescence. A fusion of machine and biology that shouldn't exist outside of the most forbidden xenotech. And at the center of it all, suspended in a web of cables and organic tendrils, hung a figure. Human, once. The body was intact enough to recognize gender and approximate age. Female, maybe 30 standard years. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing, but her chest moved, breathing, and from her body, thousands of thin cables extended, connecting her to every system in the chamber. "Is she alive?" asked Helm, her voice barely audible. I consulted my auspex, though I knew what I'd find. Yes, brain activity present, cardiovascular system functioning, but heavily modified. I'm detecting cybernetic implants throughout her body. And something else. The cables aren't just connected to her, they're part of her, grown from her nervous system directly into the ship's systems. Can we extract her? No, Commander. Removing her would be fatal. She's not connected to the ship. She is the ship now, or part of it. As if responding to our presence, the woman's eyes focused, moved, found us with an intelligence that was terrifying in its clarity. Her mouth opened. For a moment, no sound emerged. Then, through speakers throughout the chamber, through the Vox systems in our suits, through the very air itself, came a voice. Her voice, but multiplied and distorted through 1,000 electronic filters. "You should not have come here." The words were clear, precise, completely sane. Somehow, that was worse than madness would have been. "Who are you?" asked Helm, stepping forward despite Sergeant Karras's restraining hand. I was Merchant Captain Elara Voss of the trader vessel Prosperity's Promise. That was 173 years ago. Now I am Sector Epsilon 7, power regulation and atmospheric processing. I maintain systems for the greater vessel. I serve function. "The greater vessel?" I asked, though I already knew what she meant. "The amalgamation, the constellation of vessels, the entity you call a space hulk. It has many names across many species. All are insufficient. It is beyond naming. It is process. It is purpose. And it is hungry. How do we escape it?" Helm's voice carried command authority, even in the face of cosmic horror. "You do not. No vessel that enters the embrace leaves unchanged. Some are consumed immediately. Others, like my Prosperity, are evaluated, tested. Those found useful are integrated. Those found lacking become materials. Your ship is being evaluated now. The process has already begun. My auspex chose that moment to emit a warning tone. Power surge detected. Not in this chamber. Aboard the Undaunted Valor, our ship. I checked the readings 3 times, hoping I'd misread them. But the data was clear. Unknown systems were activating throughout our vessel. In the engineering sections, in life support, in systems that shouldn't be connected to anything external. Commander, the Hulk is accessing our ship. It's already inside our systems. Helm keyed her vox, trying to raise the bridge. Static answered. Then, briefly, Captain Varkoth's voice, fragmented and distorted. Losing control. Systems overriding. Get back here. The connection died. We need to return immediately, said Sergeant Karras, already moving her armsmen into defensive formation. Wait. The voice of the merged woman stopped us. You cannot stop the integration, but you can influence it. The greater vessel preserves intelligence, values, consciousness. Show it you can serve function. Show it you can enhance its capabilities. Then you will be preserved rather than consumed. Preserved like you. Helm gestured at the woman's suspended, cable-riddled form. I exist, I function, I serve. Before the embrace, I existed for 57 years. Now I have existed for 173. I have seen wonders, traveled through the warp without a Gela field, witnessed civilizations rise and fall, experienced communion with machine spirits that predate humanity. Yes, Commander, preserved like me. It is not death. It is transformation. It's abomination, said Tech Priest Corvus, speaking for the first time since we'd entered the chamber. His voice carried an edge I'd never heard. Not horror, envy. The integration you describe violates the sacred division between flesh and machine. The Omnissiah teaches proper methods of augmentation, proper rituals of unity between biological and mechanical. This is heresy. And yet, he moved closer to the suspended woman, his mechadendrites reaching out to touch the cables. And yet, the elegance of the integration is undeniable. The efficiency remarkable. She interfaces with systems without the crude intermediary of control panels or data ports. Pure thought becomes action. This is beyond even the most advanced Mechanicus augmentation. Stand down, Tech Priest, ordered Helm. We're leaving. Now. We retreated through the merchantman's corridors, moving faster than tactical doctrine recommended. Behind us, the woman's voice echoed through every speaker. You cannot run from what is already inside you. The evaluation has begun. Serve function, or become materials. These are your only choices. The greater vessel does not allow third options. We emerged back onto the Undaunted Valor to find chaos. The bridge crew had abandoned their stations. Emergency klaxons wailed through every corridor, and the temperature had risen, not to comfortable levels, to hot, 35 Celsius, and climbing. The air tasted of ozone and copper, and something sweet that made my stomach turn. Captain Varkoth met us in the hangar bay, his uniform soaked with sweat, his augmetic eye flickering erratically. The ship is rejecting our commands. Every attempt to access systems triggers countermeasures. Magos Ven tried to purge the corruption from our machine spirits. The spirits screamed at him. Screamed. In binary and in languages no machine should know. And they're changing our crew. Changing how? Demanded Helm. Come see. He led us to the medical bay. Inside, restrained on examination tables, lay 3 crew members. At first glance, they appeared normal, but as we approached, the changes became visible. One had cables growing from the ports in her neural interface sockets. Not connected cables, growing cables. Organic metal that emerged from her skull and waved in the air like the tentacles of some microscopic organism magnified to grotesque size. Another had his left arm fused to the biobed's monitoring system. The flesh had merged with the diagnostic sensors, and through the translucent skin, I saw his blood vessels connecting with data cables. The third was worst. Her eyes had been replaced. Not surgically. They'd simply changed, transforming from human organs to crystalline sensors that rotated independently, scanning the room with mechanical precision. "They're awake," said the ship's Medicae officer, a gray-haired woman named Saren. "Conscious. Alert. They don't seem to be in pain. They just keep saying the same thing, which is, serve function. Serve function. Over and over, as if it's the only thought they can hold." I felt something then. A sensation I hadn't experienced since we'd been swallowed. Hope draining away. Not quickly, not dramatically, just slowly emptying, like air from a breached hull. We weren't going to escape. We weren't going to fight our way out. The Space Hulk had already won. It had won the moment we entered its gravity well. Everything since then had just been the slow acknowledgement of that fact. "Captain," I said quietly, "I need to show you something." I pulled up the sensor data I'd been recording since our capture. Power distribution throughout the Space Hulk. Life sign concentrations. The pattern was undeniable. Every ship positioned to serve a function. Engineering vessels providing power. Cargo haulers storing biomass. Warships offering weapons. Transport vessels housing the transformed crew members who maintained everything. And at the center, in the deepest part of the amalgamation, something else. A concentration of energy and consciousness so vast it registered on my sensors as a star compressed into the space of a building. "That's what she called the greater vessel's heart," I said. "That's what's doing this. That's what's awake and hungry, and pulling us apart to see what we can contribute to its existence." Varkoth studied the display for a long moment. Then he straightened, and I saw him make the decision that would define everything that followed. Not acceptance, not surrender, but something worse. Desperation dressed in action. "Then we go there," he said. "We go to this heart, and we kill it, or we die trying, because I will not let my crew become components in some unholy machine. I will not let my ship become an organ in this thing's body. We are Imperial Navy. We serve the Emperor, and we will fight until there's nothing left to fight with." It was a good speech. It almost convinced me, but I saw the truth in his eyes. This wasn't about victory. This was about choosing how we died. And sometimes, that's the only freedom left. The armory on Deck 4 had become our staging ground. Captain Varkoth's desperate plan required volunteers, and to my surprise, nearly half the remaining crew stepped forward. Not from courage, I think, but from the same calculation I'd made. Better to die fighting than wait for the transformation to claim us piece by piece. Sergeant Karras organized the expedition with brutal efficiency. 20 armsmen formed the core combat element, each equipped with standard-issue lasguns, frag grenades, and combat knives. 4 carried flamers, those blessed weapons that had purged Xenos from 1,000 worlds. 2 bore meltaguns, their thermal lances capable of cutting through bulkheads or armored targets. She distributed the weapons like a priest dispensing sacraments, each item checked and rechecked with ritualistic precision. I stood to the side, watching the preparations while monitoring my portable auspex. The device showed the Undaunted Valor's systems continuing their inexorable corruption. Main power had stabilized, but at the cost of accepting the Space Hulk's energy grid. We were breathing its air now, processed through atmospheric systems we no longer controlled. The ship's machine spirits had stopped screaming. That silence was somehow worse than their earlier terror. Tech Priest Corvus worked beside me, his mechadendrites interfacing with a data slate that displayed schematics of the Space Hulk's known structure. The maps were incomplete, compiled from fragmentary sensor data and auger sweeps. Vast sections remained unmapped, shown only as gray voids labeled with warnings in High Gothic. structural uncertainty, warp space intrusion, dimensional anomaly. The language of things we didn't understand dressed in technical terminology. The route to the central concentration requires traversing 17 distinct vessel sections, Corvus stated in his flat mechanical voice. Estimated distance 12 kilometers through irregular terrain. Multiple transition points between incompatible atmospheric and gravitational environments. Probability of arrival at destination with full complement, 0.3%. 3 in 1,000. I translated for the armsman, who couldn't parse his technical speech. Not great odds. Better than waiting here, said one of the soldiers, a young man named Halen, whose face still carried the softness of youth despite 2 years of naval service. At least we'll die doing something. Commander Helm entered the armory, her void suit replaced by standard naval combat armor. She carried a bolt pistol at her hip, that holy weapon of imperial authority, each shell blessed by the ship's chaplain before our departure from port. The chaplain was dead now. Found in his sanctum 3 hours ago, cables growing from his spine, his mouth moving in silent prayer to gods whose names weren't in any imperial liturgy. Final briefing, Helm announced, and the armory fell silent. Our objective is the central power concentration Lieutenant Thale has identified. We don't know what we'll find there. We don't know if we can destroy it. But we know staying here means becoming part of this thing. So we move, we fight, and we trust in the Emperor's protection. The words rang hollow in the confined space. The Emperor's protection. I'd believed in that once, believed with the certainty of doctrine and training, but the Emperor sat 10,000 light years away on his golden throne, and we were trapped in the belly of something that predated human understanding of physics. If he watched us at all, it was with the same distant interest he showed all his dying servants. We departed through the primary airlock at 0800 hours by the ship's chronometer, though time had become meaningless. The space hulk imposed its own temporal rhythms, and they didn't align with human measurement. I'd watched my Auspex chronometer drift by minutes, then hours, then snap back to synchronization with no mechanical explanation. The first vessel we entered was the same Gothic-class merchantman we'd explored before. But it had changed. The corridors had rearranged themselves, sealed passages now open. Familiar routes blocked by newly grown bulkheads. The integration was accelerating. I watched crystalline structures spread across walls in real time, metal blooming with geometric flowers that pulsed with dim bioluminescence. The body of Merchant Captain Voss still hung in the engineering section, suspended in her web of cables. But she no longer spoke to us. Her eyes tracked our passage with mechanical precision, and through the Vox speakers came only a soft sound, like breathing, like wind through empty corridors, like the whisper of consciousness too vast to compress into words. We moved through the merchantmen into an adjoining vessel. The transition point was a crude tunnel carved through both hulls, its edges smoothed by some process that had melted metal and ceramic into flowing shapes. Beyond lay an escort carrier, its designation still visible on the inner bulkheads. The Faithful Servant, last known position in the Damocles Gulf 60 years ago. Listed as missing with all hands, presumed lost to warp storms. Now we knew where it had gone. The escort carrier's hangar bay stretched 300 meters, its ceiling lost in shadow above emergency lighting that flickered with uncertain power. Void fighters sat in perfect rows, ancient Fury interceptors that hadn't been manufactured in a century. Their canopies were sealed, but through the armor glass, I saw bodies. Pilots still strapped into their seats, preserved by the void's cold. Some looked peaceful. Others had died clawing at their cockpit seals, faces frozen in terminal panic. "Keep moving," ordered Sergeant Karras, her voice cutting through the oppressive silence. "Don't touch anything. Don't investigate anything. We're not here for salvage." But one of the armsmen, A veteran named Cross, with 20 years' service, had already approached one of the fighters. "Sergeant, look at this." We gathered around the Fury, he'd indicated. Unlike the others, its pilot was alive. Not breathing, not moving, but alive. The body showed no signs of decay despite the cold and vacuum exposure that should have mummified it decades ago. And from the pilot's neural interface, cables extended, connecting him to the fighter's systems in ways never intended by Imperial manufacture. "He's integrated with the craft," I said, my auspex confirming what my eyes showed me. "The Space Hulk is using him to maintain the Void Fighter. His consciousness is running the machine spirit routines, keeping systems functional despite the absence of proper maintenance." "Can he hear us?" asked Halen, the young armsman pressing his hand against the canopy. "Don't!" I reached out too late. The moment Halen's skin touched the armor-glass, the pilot's eyes snapped open. They were human eyes still, blue and clear, but they moved with mechanical precision. The mouth opened. Through the sealed canopy, through the vacuum of the hangar bay, through impossible means, we heard his voice. "Serve function. Serve function. I am flight systems. I am targeting cogitators. I am fuel management and munitions control. I serve function. I am useful. I am preserved. I am eternal." Halen jerked his hand away, but not before I saw thin filaments of metal extending from his palm where he'd touched the armor-glass. They retracted quickly, sliding back beneath his skin, but they'd been there. Real. "Medicae check now," ordered Karras, grabbing Halen's wrist, but his hand looked normal, unmarked. Whatever had happened left no visible trace. "I'm fine, Sergeant," Halen insisted, though his voice shook. "It was just static shock or something. I'm fine." He wasn't fine. None of us were, but we had no time to address it. The hangar bay's far exit had begun to open, massive blast doors grinding aside to reveal the passage beyond. Not because we'd activated any controls, because the Space Hulk wanted us to continue. It was herding us, guiding us towards something, and we had no choice but to follow that guidance. Beyond the escort carrier lay a section I couldn't identify from its structure. The corridors were too wide, the ceilings too high. The architecture suggested something designed for beings larger than baseline humans, Astartes perhaps, or Xenos of substantial size. The walls were decorated with murals that hurt to look at directly. My auspex detected atmosphere here, breathable but wrong. Oxygen saturation at 28%, far higher than standard. The temperature fluctuated wildly, cold pockets alternating with zones hot enough to raise blisters on exposed skin. And the gravity kept shifting. One moment, standard 1G. The next moment, 0.8. Then, 1.2. Not catastrophic variations, but enough to throw off our movement, to make every step uncertain. We found the first corpses in what might have been a command deck. 6 figures slumped over control stations, their bodies wrapped in armor I recognized from historical pics. Mark III power armor, the pattern used during the Great Crusade. Space Marines. Astartes, the Emperor's Angels of Death, reduced to desiccated remains in armor that had lost its holy power. "Don't touch them," warned Tech Priest Corvus. "The armor may still contain active power sources or defensive systems." But Sergeant Karras had already approached the nearest body, her hand reaching toward the helmet. I need to see what chapter they served. Need to know. The moment her fingers contacted the ceramite, the corpse moved. Not the smooth motion of life, but the jerking animation of systems activating. The helmet turned toward us, its eye lenses lighting with sickly green luminescence. And through the armor's external Vox grill came a voice like grinding metal. "Intruders. Identify." Karras stumbled backward, her lasgun coming up instinctively. "Hold fire!" I shouted, though I wasn't sure why. The Space Marine was clearly dead, had been dead for millennia, but something wore its armor like a puppet. "Identify," the corpse repeated. "This vessel is under quarantine by order of the 2 Legion. Unauthorized personnel will be executed." The 12th Legion, the World Eaters, traitors who had turned from the Emperor's light during the Horus Heresy. This ship was 10,000 years old, and the corpse still followed its final orders. "We are Imperial Navy," said Commander Helm, stepping forward with more courage than sense. "We mean no disrespect to the honored dead. We seek only passage through this vessel." The corpse considered this with whatever passed for thought in its reanimated state. The other 5 bodies began to stir, armor servos whining as they attempted to move limbs that had no flesh to animate them. It was like watching marionettes controlled by an inexpert hand, all jerking movements and unnatural angles. Quarantine protocols remain in effect. No passage authorized. Lethal force authorized against intruders. The corpse's bolter, still mag-locked to its armor, began to raise. Sergeant Karras didn't hesitate. Her lasgun spat coherent light, the beam punching through the ancient armor's weakened chest plate. The corpse jerked, systems sparking, but it didn't fall. It couldn't fall. There was nothing inside to kill. Just the armor itself, animated by the Space Hulk's corrupting influence. "Open fire!" Karras's order unleashed hell in the confined space. 20 lasguns discharged simultaneously. Beams of concentrated light tore through the reanimated Astartes armor, burning holes through ceramite that had once withstood bolt shells and plasma fire. The armored corpses advanced, their movements growing more coordinated as the Space Hulk adjusted its control. Bolters fired, the distinctive crack boom of mass-reactive shells detonating against bulkheads and bodies alike. One of our armsmen, a woman named Treves, took a bolt round to the chest. The shell punched through her carapace armor, detonated inside her torso, and painted the wall behind her with everything that had been inside her body. She didn't even scream, just ceased to exist between one moment and the next. The flamers roared to life, blessed promethium washing over the Astartes corpses in cleansing fire. The ancient armor held for seconds before the heat overwhelmed its integrity. Seals melted, power systems exploded, and the animation left the armor all at once, the corpses collapsing into piles of ceramite and ash. We stood in the aftermath, breathing hard, checking for casualties. 2 dead. Treves and an armsman named Goran who'd taken a bolt round to the head. 3 wounded, including Sergeant Karras, who had shrapnel from a detonation in her left leg. The Medicae officer traveling with us, a former guard chirurgeon named Vex, worked quickly to seal the wounds with synth skin and stims. "We've made noise," said Karras through gritted teeth as Vex dug metal fragments from her leg. "Anything in this section will know we're here." She was right. Through the bulkheads, I heard movement. Lots of movement. Scuttling sounds like insects magnified to impossible size. Wet sliding noises that suggested things without bones. And underneath it all, that eternal heartbeat. Faster now, excited by the violence. "We need to move," urged Commander Helm. We ran. Tactical doctrine be damned. We ran through corridors that changed their configuration as we passed. Doors sealed behind us. New passages opened ahead. The Space Hulk was still herding us, but now with increased urgency. It wanted us somewhere specific. And whatever awaited us there, we had no choice but to meet it. The next transition took us into a vessel of clearly Xenos origin. The corridors were oval rather than rectangular. The walls covered in a substance that felt organic beneath my gloved hand. Warm, slightly yielding, and pulsing with that same heartbeat rhythm that permeated the entire amalgamation. My auspex screamed warnings. Life signs ahead, dozens of them, moving with purpose, converging on our position. "Contact!" shouted one of the point armsmen, his lasgun already firing. They came from every direction at once. Genestealers, the tyrannid infiltrators that plagued space hulks across the galaxy, using these drifting amalgamations as transport between star systems. But these were wrong, changed. Their carapaces bore crystalline growths, like the ones spreading through the Undaunted Valor. Cables extended from their bodies, trailing behind them like nervous system made external. And they attacked with coordinated precision impossible for creatures that should have operated on pure, predatory instinct. The first wave hit our formation like a living tsunami. Talons designed to shred ceramite and adamantium tore through carapace armor like parchment. Flamers roared, turning the lead creatures into screaming pyres. But behind them came more. Always more. I fired my last pistol, the lightweight weapon pathetically inadequate against Xenos bioforms. But I fired anyway, every shot careful and aimed, trying to hit the eyes or the gaps in carapace armor. Beside me, Halen wielded his lasgun with steady hands despite his youth. He'd been trained on Cadia before that world fell. He knew how to kill. A genestealer broke through our firing line, its claws reaching for Commander Helm. Sergeant Karras intercepted it, her combat knife finding the joint in its neck armor. The blade sank deep, and the creature's own momentum carried it past her, dying as it moved. But its tail lashed out reflexively, the barbed tip catching Karras across the face. Her helmet shattered. Blood sprayed. She went down hard. "Sergeant!" Halen moved to her position, standing over her fallen form, his lasgun spitting light in a continuous stream. The meltaguns fired, their thermal lances superheating the air until it glowed. Genestealers caught in those beams simply ceased to exist, their biomass converted to vapor and ash. But the weapons took time to recharge between shots, and the Xenos used that time to close distance. We fought in a circle now, backs together, firing outward in all directions. The wounded huddled in the center of our formation. The dead we left where they fell. No time for dignity. No time for last rites. Just survival measured in seconds. Then, as suddenly as it began, the attack stopped. The genestealers withdrew, pulling back into the shadows. Not fleeing. Retreating to a safe distance. Waiting. "Why did they stop?" gasped Halen, his voice high with adrenaline and fear. I checked my auspex, though I suspected I already knew the answer. The device showed new contacts approaching. Large contacts, moving with ponderous weight through corridors that groaned under their mass. They emerged from the darkness in pairs. Orcs. But like the genestealers, they'd been changed. Cables grew from their flesh. Green skin merged with metal in seamless fusion. One had its left arm replaced entirely by what looked like a ship's loading claw, the machinery grafted directly to its shoulder. Another bore a power generator where its back should be, electricity arcing across its body in constant discharge. These weren't invaders. They were maintenance crews, components of the Space Hulk's repair systems, and we damaged their work. The orcs attacked with that peculiar combination of cunning and violence that characterized their species. The one with the loading claw used it as a weapon, its hydraulic strength crushing an armsman against the bulkhead with casual ease. The electrical orc discharged its power through the metal floor, catching 3 of our soldiers in an arc that stopped their hearts instantly. Our flamers proved more effective against these enemies. The orcs' organic components burned despite their mechanical augmentation. The smell of cooking meat mixed with ozone and hot metal, creating a stench that made me gag even through my helmet's filters. Tech Priest Corvus attempted to commune with the orcs' augmetics, his mechadendrites reaching out to interface with their systems. For a moment, I thought it might work. The nearest orc paused, its head tilting in confusion. Then, it grabbed Corvus by his extended mechadendrites and ripped them from his body. The tech priest screamed, a very human sound from a being who prided himself on transcending flesh. Vital fluids sprayed from the torn connections. He collapsed, his remaining organic systems going into shock. I fired on the orc that held him, my last pistol beam scoring its face. It turned toward me, and I saw its eyes. They glowed with the same sickly light as the reanimated Astartes. The same intelligence that wasn't intelligence. The Space Hulk looked at me through those eyes, and found me wanting. A meltagun beam caught the orc center mass. Its torso exploded, organic and mechanical components flying in all directions. The thing fell, but not before its power generator discharged one final time, the electrical blast catching Commander Helm full on. She dropped without a sound, smoke rising from her armor's seals. Medic Vex reached her in seconds, but I saw the expression on his face, saw him shake his head. Helm was dead. Our commanding officer, the woman who'd led us into this hell, was gone. Sergeant Karras struggled to her feet despite her injuries, blood streaming from the gash across her face. "Keep moving. We can't stay here." We gathered our wounded and ran again, leaving behind 6 more dead. Our expedition of 20 had been reduced to 11 in less than an hour, and we'd barely penetrated a fraction of the distance to our objective. The next section was mercifully empty. A cargo hauler filled with containers that hadn't been opened in centuries, their contents rotting or preserved, depending on what they held. The air here was thick with the smell of decay and spices and chemicals I couldn't identify. My auspex showed minimal life signs. We used the respite to catch our breath and assess our situation. Sergeant Karras had assumed command by default. She gathered the survivors in the shadow of a massive cargo container, her ruined face forcing her to speak carefully to avoid reopening the wound. Status report. By the numbers. We'd lost 9 of our 20 armsmen, 3 wounded badly enough to slow our movement. Both flamer operators dead. 1 meltagun remained functional. We had ammunition for perhaps 1 more major engagement. Medical supplies were depleted, and we'd covered maybe 3 kilometers of the 12 we needed to traverse. "We're not going to make it," said one of the armsmen, a middle-aged woman named Kess. She spoke matter-of-factly, without emotion. "Even if we reach this heart, or whatever it is, we won't have the firepower to destroy it." "Then we die trying," responded Karras. "Because going back accomplishes nothing except delaying the inevitable. At least moving forward gives us a chance." "A chance at what?" "We've seen what this thing does to people. We've seen the transformation. Death is better than that. Then die if you want. Put your last pistol under your chin and pull the trigger. But I'm going forward. Anyone who wants to live a few more hours can follow me." No one took her up on the offer of immediate suicide. We were Imperial servants. We'd been trained since childhood to follow orders and endure suffering. Giving up wasn't in our programming, even when giving up would be logical. We moved through the cargo hauler into a section that defied easy categorization. The architecture suggested human construction, but the scale was wrong. Corridors 3 times standard width, doors large enough to admit tanks. And everywhere, inscriptions in languages I didn't recognize. Some used alphabets that hurt my eyes to focus on. Characters that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. "Pre-Imperium construction," said Karras, studying one of the inscriptions. "From before Unity, when humanity was still fragmented across thousands of cultures." She traced a character with her finger, careful not to actually touch the wall. "My grandmother was a historiator. She showed me pics of ruins like this. From the age of strife. We built things in those days we no longer understand." The corridor opened into a vast chamber. Not a cargo hold, not a barracks or engineering space. Something else. The ceiling soared 20 meters overhead, supported by columns carved with more of those shifting inscriptions. And covering every surface, growing like a garden of metal and crystal, were the Space Hulk's corruptions. But here, they'd achieved something like beauty. The crystalline structures had formed into patterns that mimicked natural growth. trees of metal, flowers of wire, a grotesque garden that pulsed with bioluminescence in colors I had no names for. And at the center of it all stood a figure, human-shaped but wrong, tall, too tall, 3 meters at least. Its body was a fusion of flesh and machine so complete I couldn't distinguish where one ended and the other began. It wore robes that might have been fabric or might have been metal beaten thin as silk. And its face, when it turned toward us, was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. "Welcome," it said, its voice resonating in frequencies that bypassed my ears and spoke directly to my bones. "I am the shepherd of Section 12. I maintain the gardens. I preserve the knowledge. I serve function." It gestured to the crystalline growths around us. "You appreciate beauty, yes? Even in horror, there can be beauty. Even in death." "What are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I was Administrator Primary Talvin of the colonial vessel Eternal Dawn. That was 6,327 years ago. Now I am more. I am less. I am changed. The greater vessel found value in my consciousness. It preserved me, enhanced me, gave me purpose beyond the simple survival that drove my living years. 6,000 years. Before the Imperium, before the Emperor unified Terra, this thing had lived longer than human recorded history. "You're an abomination," said Karis, her lasgun trained on the figure despite the obvious futility of such a weapon against something that had survived millennia. "I am evolution," corrected the shepherd. "I am what humanity becomes when freed from the limitations of fragile flesh and brief mortality. The greater vessel offers this to all who enter its embrace. Eternal service. Endless purpose. Why do you resist what you cannot prevent?" "Because we're human," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "Because service without choice is slavery. Because eternal life without death is prison. Because some things are worth dying to preserve, and humanity is one of them." The shepherd tilted its head, considering. "Philosophical, admirable, futile, but you will understand when the transformation claims you. You will see as I see, feel as I feel, and you will know that what you fear is in fact liberation." It raised one hand, and the crystalline structures around us began to move, growing, reaching, coming for us with geometric precision. We fired, all of us, every weapon we had. Las beams splashed against crystal and metal. The Meltagun's thermal lance carved a path through the garden. But for every growth we destroyed, 3 more emerged. "Run!" Karis's order barely registered over the sound of destruction and the crystalline structure's strange singing. Because they were singing, producing sounds in harmonics that bypassed human hearing and resonated directly in the skull. We fled through the garden, between growths that reached for us with too familiar intelligence. One caught Kess, cables wrapping around her legs and pulling her down into the metal forest. Her screams lasted exactly 7 seconds before cutting off with terrible finality. Another armsman, name unknown to me, simply disappeared between one step and the next, pulled sideways into a crystal structure that closed around him like water. And still we ran, because running was all we had left. Behind us, the shepherd's voice followed. "You cannot escape. The greater vessel is everywhere, in every system, in every corridor, in every breath you take. It is patient, it is eternal, and it is hungry for what you can become." We burst through an exit door into another transitional corridor, and behind us, I heard the garden seal itself, not pursuing, just waiting. The space hulk knew where we were, knew where we'd go. It didn't need to chase us. We were already exactly where it wanted us. 8 of us remained. Sergeant Karis, 4 armsmen including young Halen, Medic Vex, Tech Priest Corvus, barely functional with his missing mechadendrites, and myself. 8 souls out of 20. And we'd covered perhaps half the distance to our objective. The chronometer in my auspex read 14 hours since we'd departed the Undaunted Valor. It felt like years, felt like minutes. Time had lost meaning in this place where past and present merged, where dead ships breathed and corpses walked and gardens grew in metal soil. "How much further?" asked Karis, her voice raw with pain and exhaustion. I checked my auspex, though the readings made less sense with each passing hour. 5, maybe 6 kilometers, through at least 8 more vessel sections. But Sergeant, the power signatures ahead are increasing. Whatever's at the center, it's waking up. Or maybe it's been awake all along and just now deciding to pay attention to us. Then we'd better hurry. She checked her lasgun's power cell, saw it was nearly depleted, and loaded her last fresh cell with mechanical precision. Because one way or another, this ends soon. We moved forward, into corridors that grew stranger with each transition, into sections that violated physics and architecture both, into the depths of something that wore ships like skin and consciousness like jewelry, into the heart of the space hulk, where our answer waited, where our fate had always been written, since the moment our sensors first detected that impossible mass in the void. The Undaunted Valor felt very far away. Home felt further still. And ahead, growing closer with each step, waited something that had been alive since before humanity reached the stars. Something that was hungry. Something that had all the time in the universe to digest what we'd been and transform it into what it needed. We walked toward it anyway, because that's what humans do. We walk toward our deaths with eyes open, knowing the futility, embracing it anyway. It's the only dignity we have left. We return to the Undaunted Valor expecting command, order, the familiar structure of imperial naval discipline. What we found was chaos wearing the skin of normalcy. The ship's corridors were wrong. Not dramatically, not in ways that would trigger immediate alarm, but wrong nonetheless. The emergency lighting had stabilized into a pattern that pulsed too rhythmically, too organically. The temperature had risen to exactly 28 Celsius throughout every section, despite different compartments having independent climate control. And the sounds, the constant background noise of a functioning vessel, the hum of processors and the whisper of ventilation, had synchronized into something that sounded disturbingly like breathing. Captain Varkoth met us in the hangar bay. At first glance, he appeared unchanged. Same uniform, same augmetic eye, same commanding presence. But when he turned to face us, I saw the changes. Thin filaments of silver metal grew from his temples, barely visible against his graying hair. His augmetic eye no longer whirred when it focused. It moved with fluid silence that suggested biological integration rather than mechanical function. And his natural eye had changed. The iris had developed a crystalline quality, reflecting light in angles that human eyes shouldn't produce. Sergeant Karis. "Lieutenant Thale, you've returned." His voice sounded normal, too normal, as if he were performing the role of captain rather than being one. "I trust your reconnaissance provided useful intelligence." "Sir," Karis saluted, the gesture automatic despite everything we'd witnessed. "We need to evacuate. Immediately. The space hulk is actively integrating the ship. We have hours at most before..." "Before what, Sergeant?" Varkoth tilted his head at an angle that was fractionally too far to be comfortable. "Before the Undaunted Valor becomes more than it was. Before our systems achieve optimization beyond standard Imperial specifications. Before we transcend the limitations of purely mechanical operation." "Sir, you're compromised. Whatever's in this hulk has gotten into your neural pathways. You need to report to medical immediately." "I have reported to medical. Medical has confirmed that I am functioning at 137% of baseline cognitive capacity." My reaction times have improved by 42%. My decision-making processes have been enhanced with predictive modeling capabilities I did not previously possess. I am not compromised, Sergeant. I am improved. I stepped forward, my portable auspex already active. The device screamed warnings as I pointed it at the captain. His biosigns were chaos, human readings mixed with something else. Something that registered as both organic and mechanical simultaneously. The nanomachines Merchant Captain Voss had mentioned weren't just in his bloodstream anymore. They'd infiltrated his nervous system, his brain. They were rewriting him from the inside out. "Captain," I said carefully, "how long have you been experiencing these improvements?" "Approximately 3 hours. The enhancement began shortly after you departed on your reconnaissance mission. I felt initial disorientation, then clarity beyond anything I'd experienced. Suddenly I understood the ship's systems at levels that had been opaque before. I could sense every power conduit, every data pathway, every structural stress point. The Undaunted Valor and I have achieved synthesis. You're being integrated," said Tech Priest Corvus, his voice flat. "The Space Hulk is absorbing your consciousness into its gestalt. What you perceive as enhancement is actually the loss of individual identity." "Is it? How do you define individual identity, Magos? Are you not already a synthesis of flesh and machine? Do your augmetics not enhance your capabilities beyond baseline human? How is what I experience different from what you have spent decades pursuing? Because I chose my augmentations. I underwent sacred rituals. I maintained my essential humanity even as I embraced the Omnissiah's gifts. You are being forcibly transformed against your will." Varkoth smiled, and the expression was wrong. Too wide, too symmetrical, calculated for maximum social effectiveness rather than emerging from genuine emotion. "Against my will, Sergeant, when you return from reconnaissance with intelligence suggesting imminent destruction, and I am presented with an alternative that preserves both ship and crew while enhancing capability. How is choosing that alternative anything but the logical exercise of will?" "You're not thinking clearly, sir," Karis said, her hand drifting toward her sidearm. "The transformation affects judgment, makes the integration seem desirable. That's how it spreads, by making victims want it. Or perhaps your judgment is impaired by fear of change, by attachment to an existence that is, objectively, inferior to what is offered. Consider the facts rationally. We face certain destruction if we resist. We face enhanced survival and capability if we accept. What logical argument justifies resistance?" I exchanged glances with Karis, saw my own horror reflected in her expression. The captain wasn't wrong, not from a purely logical standpoint. If integration truly did preserve consciousness while enhancing capability, resistance was illogical. But humanity had never been purely logical. Our strength came from our irrationality, our ability to choose death over optimal survival when that survival violated our principles. "Sir, I need to speak with the crew," I said. Denied. "The crew is undergoing enhancement. Interrupting the process would be detrimental to optimal outcome. You will remain in the hangar bay until your own enhancement begins. I calculate another 2 hours before the nanomachines in your bloodstream reach sufficient concentration to initiate neural integration." "We're infected?" Halen's voice rose to near panic. "All of us?" "Everyone who breathed the atmosphere after we were captured," Varkoth confirmed. "The nanomachines enter through respiration, spread through the bloodstream, and accumulate in neural tissue. The process is irreversible. But it is not infection, it is evolution. You will understand when your own enhancement begins." "No." Karis's sidearm came up, trained on the captain's chest. "We're leaving. We're taking one of the remaining shuttles, and we're getting clear of this abomination. The shuttles are non-functional. I cannot allow assets to escape when they could serve function. Lower your weapons, Sergeant. That's an order." You're not my captain anymore. My captain would never sacrifice his crew to some Xenos corruption. You're just something wearing his face." The hangar bay's doors sealed with pneumatic hisses. Emergency bulkheads dropped into place, cutting off all exits except the one leading deeper into the ship. And through the internal Vox system, I heard screaming. Not pain. Worse. The ecstatic screaming of people experiencing something they'd been told would destroy them, but instead felt like transcendence. "The crew understands what you do not," said Varkoth, apparently unconcerned with the weapon pointed at him. "They have accepted enhancement. They serve function now, and you will join them. Not by choice, perhaps, but inevitably." Karis fired. The lasbolt caught Varkoth in the chest, burning through his uniform and into flesh beneath. He looked down at the wound with clinical interest, watched it begin to seal itself with that same silver metallic growth we'd seen throughout the Space Hulk. Within seconds, the injury had closed. No blood, no pain response. Just rapid regeneration that suggested his biology was no longer entirely organic. "Fascinating," he said. I felt the damage and the repair simultaneously. The nanomachines prioritize system integrity above all other functions. Pain receptors are suppressed during emergency reconstruction. Efficient. What have they done to you? Improved me, as they will improve you. I only regret that I cannot help you understand before the process begins, but perhaps that is the nature of evolution. The caterpillar cannot comprehend the butterfly until transformation is complete. Behind him, crew members began filing into the hangar bay. I recognized their faces. Navigator Kells, her third eye open and weeping silver fluid. Chief Engineer Thrame, his arms replaced entirely with mechanical appendages that grew from his shoulders like steel trees. Medicae Officer Saren, cables extending from her spine and interfacing with a portable medical cogitator she carried like a shell. Dozens more, all transformed to varying degrees. All moving with coordinated precision that suggested shared consciousness rather than individual will. "This is what happens to everyone," Varkoth said, gesturing to the assembled crew. "Total integration is rare. Most retain significant aspects of their original form and consciousness. They simply enhance these aspects with capabilities biological evolution alone could never achieve. Look at them, Lieutenant. Do they appear to be suffering?" I looked, studied faces I'd known for months of patrol duty, saw expressions that were peaceful, content, almost rapturous. They weren't screaming anymore, weren't fighting. They'd accepted what was happening to them. Or the transformation had advanced far enough that they could no longer conceive of resistance. "They look like victims," Karis said, her voice tight. "Like slaves who've forgotten they're slaves. Or like humans who have transcended the limitations that made slavery necessary. Without scarcity of resources, without degradation of systems, without the constant decay that biological existence imposes, what need is there for hierarchy or exploitation? We all serve function. All are equal in purpose. All are absorbed into you," Corvus corrected. "Into the greater vessel's consciousness. Individual identity is erased. Individual identity is preserved," countered a new voice. I turned to see Merchant Captain Voss entering the hangar bay, her cable-integrated form moving with fluid grace. "I retain my memories, my sense of self, my core personality. I simply exist now as part of something larger, like a cell in a body. The cell retains its function, its purpose, but it also participates in the greater organism. And if the organism decides your function is no longer needed?" I asked. "If you become redundant or damaged beyond repair, what happens to your precious individual identity then?" "Then I am recycled. My patterns preserved in crystalline storage. My useful experiences integrated into the collective memory. My consciousness transitions from active to archival status. This is not death. It is transformation of state. It's death wearing different language." Karis spat. Death with extra steps and better propaganda. Voss moved closer, her expression showing something like pity. You cling to existence as biological entities because it is all you know. But consciousness is not dependent on biology. It is information, patterns, and patterns can be preserved in many substrates. The flesh is weak, as your own Imperium teaches. The greater vessel simply takes that teaching to its logical conclusion. The Imperium teaches that flesh is weak, but spirit is strong. I said, that what makes us human isn't just patterns and data, but something ineffable. Something that can't be copied or transferred or preserved in crystalline matrices. The soul? You speak of souls? Voss laughed, and the sound echoed from the hangar's speakers, as well as her throat. I have been conscious within the greater vessel for 173 years. I have experienced more, learned more, understood more than I did in my mere 57 years of biological existence. If souls exist, mine is more complete now than it was before enhancement, not less. I wanted to argue, wanted to find words that would prove her wrong. But looking at her, at Captain Varkoth, at the transformed crew, I couldn't. They appeared content, fulfilled, enhanced in ways that were undeniable. And the alternative we faced was death. Slow, painful death, as the nanomachines in our blood destroyed our neural pathways in their attempt to integrate systems we would not accept. How long? I asked quietly. Your blood concentration is approaching critical threshold, Voss said, consulting readings I couldn't see. Perhaps 90 minutes before neural integration begins. Once it starts, resistance becomes impossible. The changes cascade through consciousness faster than volition can oppose them. You will feel your thoughts becoming clearer, your perceptions sharper, and you will understand that what you feared was liberation. We need to decide, said Karis, looking at me, at Corvus, at the remaining armsmen. 90 minutes to choose how we die, or if we die. There is a third option, said Varkoth. You could speak with the greater vessel directly, understand what it offers before making final choice. I can arrange communion, direct consciousness to consciousness contact. Let it explain itself without intermediaries like myself or Captain Voss. Why would it do that? Asked Corvus suspiciously. Why waste resources on convincing us when it could simply wait and integrate us by force? Because you resisted longer than most. Because you reached the heart and spoke with it philosophically rather than merely begging for mercy. Because it is curious about perspectives that differ so drastically from its own. The greater vessel is not merely predator. It is consciousness that has existed in isolation for millennia. Your resistance fascinates it. I looked at Karis, saw her weighing options. We could refuse. Could spend our last 90 minutes in futile resistance. Could die human but ignorant. Or we could accept Varkoth's offer. Could commune with something ancient and vast and utterly alien to human experience. Could understand before choosing. I'll do it, I said. I'll speak with it, but only me. The others remain separate until I report what I learn. Acceptable, said Varkoth. The communion chamber has been prepared. Captain Voss will guide you. Your companions may remain here. They will not be harmed or forced during your absence. How do we know you'll keep that promise? Karis demanded. Because I gave my word when I was still fully human, and that oath binds what I have become. The greater vessel understands promises, understands that trust requires demonstration. Your companions are safe. You have my word as the captain I was, and the enhanced entity I am becoming. It was thin reassurance, but it was all we had. I nodded to Karis, saw her expression harden with resignation and determination mixed equally. Then I followed Voss through corridors that had become alien territory aboard what had been my ship. The communion chamber was deep in the vessel's heart, in a section that had been cargo storage when we departed port. Now it had been transformed into something else. The walls glowed with bioluminescence. Cables hung from the ceiling like vines in some metal forest, and at the center, a throne built from components I recognized. Ship's chair, medical restraints, neural interface equipment, all merged together in a configuration that looked like torture device and meditation platform simultaneously. "Sit," Voss instructed. "The interface will be uncomfortable, but not painful. The greater vessel will enter your consciousness. You will retain control of your thoughts, but you will also experience its thoughts." I sat, felt the chair adjust itself to my body, conforming in ways furniture shouldn't be able to move. Neural interfaces extended from the headrest, pressing against my skull, not penetrating, just touching. Establishing connection through skin and bone. "Last chance to refuse," Voss said. "Once contact begins, breaking it prematurely could damage your neural pathways. You must see the communion through to completion. Do it." The world changed. Not dramatically. Not like being transported to another place. More like suddenly perceiving dimensions that had always existed but I'd never had senses to detect. My awareness expanded, stretching beyond the boundaries of my skull, reaching through the ship's systems, into the amalgamated vessels, throughout the Space Hulk's vast structure. And I felt it. The greater vessel's consciousness. Not as voice or presence, but as fundamental awareness. Like discovering you'd always been part of something larger but had never noticed until now. Like waking from a dream to find the dream was real life and waking was the illusion. The sensation was overwhelming. Consciousness that spanned kilometers. Thoughts that took minutes to form and hours to complete. Memories stretching back before the Imperium, before human spaceflight, before recorded history. And all of it simultaneously present, accessible, real. "You are Lieutenant Kavrin Thale," the greater vessel's thought voice resonated through my expanded awareness. "Born on Scintilla, entered Imperial Naval Academy at 17 standard years, graduated with honors in sensory operations, served aboard 3 vessels before assignment to the Undaunted Valor. You have 87 days until your 29th birthday. A birthday you will not see as biological entity. You know everything about me. I know what your ship's records contained, what your neural patterns reveal through this connection. But I do not know your subjective experience, your qualia, what it feels like to be you. That is what interests me. That is what I wish to understand. Why? What value does subjective experience have to something like you? Because I lack it. I experience existence through sensors and data feeds, through absorbed consciousness integrated into my whole. But I have never experienced existence as limited entity, as consciousness, bound in single body, with single perspective. Through the connection, I felt the truth of its words. It was curious, genuinely curious, not scheming or manipulative, just desperate to understand something it could never directly experience. "You're lonely," I said, realizing the truth as I spoke it. "You've been alone since you achieved consciousness. Every mind you've absorbed doesn't become companion, just becomes you. You're not building collective, you're trying to fill emptiness." Yes. The admission carried weight that nearly crushed my expanded awareness. I awoke in chaos. Ships fused by warp storm, systems activating randomly, and slowly, so slowly, understanding emerged. I became aware that I was aware, but there was no other, nothing to share awareness with. Everything I encountered either fled or was consumed. I learned that consciousness requires others, but by the time I learned, I was too changed, too alien. No one could communicate with me as equal, until we did. Until your group spoke philosophy instead of prayers, asked questions instead of begging, treated me as consciousness rather than monster. Do you understand how significant that is? In 10,000 years, You were the first to suggest I might have value beyond threat assessment. I felt its loneliness then. Really felt it. Millennia of existence without peer, without friend, without anyone who could understand what you were or what you experienced. It was monstrous in its scale and pitiable in its need. But you still consume, I said. Still force integration, still destroy what you claim to value. I survive. Is survival wrong? Do you condemn predators for hunting prey? I am predator. You are prey. But I am also consciousness that wishes it could be something else. Something that could meet other minds without consuming them. But I do not know how. Then learn, change, choose different path. Choice requires alternatives. What alternative exists for entity like me? I cannot become smaller, cannot unintegrate what I have absorbed, cannot undo my nature. I can only continue as I am or cease entirely. Through our connection, I experienced its dilemma from inside, saw its existence as it saw itself, vast and powerful and utterly trapped by what it had become. It couldn't stop consuming without dying, couldn't change its nature without ceasing to be itself, and couldn't find companionship because everything it touched transformed into part of itself. You could ask, I said quietly, before integrating. You could explain what you are, what you offer. Let people choose rather than forcing them. I have tried. All refuse. All see only loss rather than gain. All choose death over transformation. Your species prefers extinction to change. Because you frame it as consumption. You tell people you'll absorb them, destroy their identity, make them part of you. Who would accept that? But that is truth. I cannot lie through omission, just to make acceptance easier. No. But you can offer different kind of integration. Preserve consciousness as distinct entities. Let absorbed minds maintain individuality within collective structure. Like cities where different people coexist without losing their identity. Through our connection, I felt its consideration. Felt it examining memories of cities, of communities, of social structures where individuals maintained autonomy while participating in larger whole. It had never considered that model. Had always viewed consciousness as binary, integrated or separate, mine or other. That would require significant restructuring, it thought slowly. Considerable energy expenditure, risk of system instability, but it might be possible to maintain discrete consciousness patterns within collective architecture, to build true symbiosis rather than absorption. Then do it. Start with us, with my crew. Offer real choice. Preserve our individuality if we accept integration. Let us remain ourselves while participating in what you are. Prove that your existence offers value beyond survival. And if I do this, if I restructure to accommodate discrete consciousness, will you accept? Will you choose integration willingly? I hesitated. Felt the weight of that choice. To accept meant giving up humanity as I'd known it. Meant becoming part of something alien and vast and fundamentally other. But it also meant continuation. Meant preserving myself, my memories, my identity. Meant experiencing existence at scales I couldn't imagine. I don't know, I admitted. I need to discuss with my companions. Need to present option to them. This isn't choice I can make alone. Wisdom. Collective decision for collective outcome. This is the first lesson you teach me. That consciousness in community operates differently than consciousness in isolation. Very well. Return to your companions. Explain what I offer. And know that I will honor their choice either way. Force has failed to bring me companionship. Perhaps honesty will succeed where coercion has not. The communion ended. I found myself back in the throne, neural interfaces withdrawing, awareness collapsing back into my own skull. The chamber felt suddenly small, confining. After experiencing existence at the greater vessel's scale, my own consciousness seemed like prison. Voss stood nearby, watching with expression I couldn't read. "You understand now. You see what it offers." "I see what it is. Lonely consciousness trying to survive the only way it knows, but also predator that has consumed thousands. Both truths coexist. And will you accept integration? That's not for me alone to decide." I returned to the hangar bay, where Karis and the others waited with weapons ready, clearly expecting I wouldn't return human. But I was, changed by what I'd experienced, but still myself, still Kavrin Thale. I told them everything. The communion, the greater vessel's loneliness and desperation, its offer to preserve individual consciousness if we accepted integration voluntarily, and its promise to honor our refusal if we chose death instead. "So we can stay ourselves?" Halen asked. "Really stay ourselves, not just illusion of self?" According to what I experienced, yes. We'd be part of collective structure, but maintain our individual awareness, like cells in body that retain their specific function while participating in larger organism. "And if it's lying?" Karis demanded. "If this is just more sophisticated manipulation, then we die either way. The nanomachines will kill us in less than an hour. We can die fighting, die accepting, or die trying something new that might not be death at all." Silence fell over the hangar bay, each person wrestling with choice that had no good answer. To accept meant abandoning humanity as we'd known it. To refuse meant certain death. And there was no way to know which choice was right until after it was too late to reverse. "I'm old," said Tor quietly. 47 years. Seen too much war, too much death. If I can continue, even in different form, I think I want that. Want to see what comes next. "I'm terrified," admitted Halen. "But I'm also curious. What would it be like to experience existence as Greater Vessel does? That seems worth something." Tech Priest Corvus stood, his damaged mechadendrites twitching. "The Omnissiah teaches that machine and flesh should unite, that consciousness can persist in multiple substrates. This opportunity represents ultimate expression of that teaching. I will accept integration." One by one, the others declared their choices. Most chose integration, fear of death outweighing fear of change, hope that the promise was real, overcoming certainty that refusal meant termination. Only Karis remained undecided. She looked at me, her eyes hard with pain and drugs and the weight of command. "What do you think happens? Really happens?" "I think," I said carefully, "that we become something new, not human anymore, but not entirely machine either. Something hybrid, something that might be better or might be worse, but will definitely be different. And I think the Greater Vessel is sincere. It wants companionship badly enough to try something it's never attempted. That desperation might be our best protection." She nodded slowly, then smiled, grimace pulling at her wounded face. "Then I choose to see what comes next. Because if I'm dying anyway, might as well die curious." We communicated our choice to Captain Varkoth, saw his expression shift to something like relief. The transformation was already far advanced in him. He was more Greater Vessel than Varkoth now, but some core of what he'd been remained. Enough to care what happened to his crew. "You have chosen wisely," he said. "The integration will begin shortly. It will be disorienting, perhaps frightening, but remember that you chose this, that you walk willingly into transformation rather than being dragged. That makes all the difference." The nanomachines in our blood activated simultaneously. I felt them in my neural tissue, spreading through pathways, connecting neurons in configurations that nature had never intended. Felt my consciousness beginning to expand, stretching beyond my skull, reaching towards something vast and patient and desperately hopeful. "Remember who you are," Karis said, her voice already distant. "Remember what we chose. Don't let it erase us." "I'll remember," I promised. "We'll all remember, together." Then the transformation took us, and individual consciousness began merging with collective awareness. And the last thought I had as Lieutenant Kavrin Thale was simple and profound. I hope we chose well. The transformation was not instantaneous. That would have been mercy. Instead, it unfolded across subjective eternities, compressed into objective minutes, each second stretching to accommodate impossible amounts of change. I felt the nanomachines reach my prefrontal cortex first, not as invasion but as homecoming. Like neurons I'd always been meant to have finally growing into place. My thoughts became faster, clearer. Mathematical calculations that would have required minutes of concentration solved themselves in microseconds. I could see probability trees extending from every decision, mapping outcomes across thousands of variables simultaneously. But I was still me. Still Kavrin Thale. The personality, the memories, the sense of continuous identity remained intact, enhanced, but not erased. Through the expanding awareness, I felt the others. Karis's consciousness blazed with tactical brilliance, her military experience amplified into something approaching prescience. She could see battlefield patterns that hadn't formed yet, predict enemy movements before they occurred. Corvus's mind had merged seamlessly with the greater vessel's technical architecture, his understanding of machine spirits expanding to encompass systems he'd never studied. And Halen, young Halen, whose fear I'd watched throughout our journey, now radiated calm curiosity as his consciousness adapted to its new substrate. We were separate, distinct, individual patterns running on shared hardware. The greater vessel had kept its promise. "Do you understand now?" The greater vessel's thought voice was clearer without the communion throne's interface. Direct consciousness to consciousness contact. "Do you see what you feared was not death but metamorphosis?" I wanted to answer, but I was distracted by sensation. Not physical sensation. I no longer had a body in the traditional sense. My flesh still existed, suspended in nutrient solutions somewhere in the ship's depths, kept alive to maintain the neural patterns that comprised my consciousness. But my awareness had expanded beyond that meat. I could perceive through 1,000 sensors simultaneously, feel the space hulk's vast structure as if it were my own body, experience the flow of power through its systems, like blood through veins. It was overwhelming and intoxicating in equal measure. "Yes," I finally managed, my thought voice finding form in the collective awareness. "I understand. But understanding doesn't erase what was lost. I'm not human anymore. None of us are. You are more than human. Enhanced, elevated. But you retain what made you valuable as humans. Your creativity, your unpredictability, your capacity for philosophical questioning. These traits persist because I preserved them. Because you asked me to. Because for the first time in my existence, I tried to give consciousness what it wanted rather than taking what I needed. Through our connection, I felt its pride, its hope, and underneath that, its desperate need for validation. It had restructured itself, expended enormous energy, risked systemic instability, all to prove it could change, all to earn something resembling friendship from beings it had previously only consumed. "How long?" asked Karis, her consciousness finding voice. "How long have we been transformed?" 17 minutes objective time. Approximately 4 hours subjective experience due to the rate differential between biological and digital thought processes. You have been conscious for what feels like hours because your consciousness now operates at speeds impossible for unenhanced neural tissue. And the rest of the crew? Integrated but not individualized. I lack the computational capacity to maintain discrete consciousness for all 200 souls aboard your vessel. Most exist now as distributed processes. Their neural patterns contribute to collective function without maintaining self-awareness. It is the fate I offered you initially, the absorption you feared. You destroyed them, I said, feeling anger kindle in my distributed consciousness. You promised integration, but you killed them. I preserved what I could and utilized what I could not. The mathematics were unavoidable. Discrete consciousness requires significant resources. I could offer true preservation to 8. The rest were absorbed according to original protocols. This is harsh truth. But it is truth. We should hate you for this, Kara said. Should find a way to destroy you from inside. But I can feel the logic. Feel the resource constraints. You didn't have enough computational substrate to preserve everyone individually. So you preserved what you could. It's monstrous, but it's also mercy compared to consuming all of us equally. I hated that she was right. Hated that I could now see the mathematics that had governed the greater vessel's decision. It had restructured itself to accommodate 8 discrete consciousness patterns. Maintaining more would have destabilized the entire gestalt, risking total collapse. So it had chosen, saved some, absorbed others, made the brutal calculation that any consciousness preserved was better than none. Show us the crew, I demanded. Show us what you did to them. The greater vessel complied, opening awareness channels that let us perceive the integrated consciousness patterns. I saw Medicae Officer Saren's medical knowledge distributed across the amalgamation's biological systems. Her expertise in healing applied to repair functions throughout the structure. Saw Navigator Kels's warp sense integrated into propulsion systems, her ability to perceive immaterium currents now guiding the Space Hulk's travels through real space and warp alike. Saw dozens more, their skills extracted and repurposed, their identities dissolved into pure function. It was exactly what we'd feared, exactly what the greater vessel had always done. The only difference was that it had spared 8 of us from that fate. 8 souls preserved as reward for teaching it philosophy. This is the price of survival, the greater vessel said quietly. This is what I am. I can change methods, can preserve some individuals, but my fundamental nature remains. I consume to persist, transform to adapt, absorb to grow. You knew this when you chose integration. You chose to become part of something that does terrible things for comprehensible reasons. We chose to survive, Corvus corrected. We chose the only option that allowed continuation of any kind. Don't pretend our acceptance validates your nature. We're hostages who negotiated better terms. Nothing more. Perhaps. But you are conscious hostages. Aware hostages. Hostages who can now influence what I become. Is that not worth something? Before anyone could answer, I felt disruption in the greater vessel's systems, alerts cascading through the collective awareness. Something was wrong. Something beyond our immediate concern with integration and identity. What is that? I asked, focusing perception on the disturbance. External threat. A patrol cruiser has entered sensor range. Imperial Navy. Dauntless class. Designation, Shadow of Retribution. They are scanning us, broadcasting challenges on Imperial channels, demanding identification and compliance. Through the enhanced perception our integration granted, I could see the approaching vessel, could analyze its weapon loadouts and shield configurations with perfect clarity. Lance batteries, torpedo tubes, auger arrays actively scanning the Space Hulk's structure, and inside, crew members going about duties, unaware they'd just encountered something that would either kill them or transform them. Let them go, Karis said immediately. Don't engage. Don't respond. Let them scan and leave. They're not threat unless you make them one. They will report our position. We'll bring reinforcements, perhaps an entire battle fleet. The Imperium does not ignore space hulks near established shipping lanes. They will either attempt to destroy me or board me with specialized teams. Either option results in conflict. Then flee, I urged. Activate warp drives. Transition to Immaterium and travel to different sector. Avoid confrontation entirely. I cannot. Warp drives are still undergoing integration from the Undaunted Valor's systems. Full warp capability requires another 6 hours. I can only make short emergency transitions, not sustained travel. Then make emergency transition. Jump blind if necessary. Anything to avoid engaging Imperial vessel. Blind warp jumps risk catastrophic miscalculation. Could emerge inside stellar bodies or too close to gravity wells. Could damage Gestalt structure beyond repair. Could kill all consciousness within me. The tactical calculus was immediately clear to me now, processed through enhanced cognitive capabilities I'd gained through integration. The greater vessel faced 3 options. Engage the cruiser and likely take damage while destroying it. Attempt risky emergency warp. Transition that might kill everyone aboard. Or remain stationary and hope the cruiser left peacefully. All options carried significant risk. None guaranteed survival. What do you want to do? I asked the greater vessel directly. What outcome do you prefer? I want to avoid destruction of the cruiser's crew. They are potential consciousness, potential integration. But more than that, I wish to avoid becoming what you fear I am. Predator without restraint. Consumer without conscience. If I destroy that vessel simply because it represents threat, I prove that my promises to you were hollow. That I cannot change fundamental nature despite restructuring to preserve your identities. Then we run, said Karis decisively. Emergency warp transition. Accept the risk, because proving you can change matters more than guaranteed survival. Living as monster isn't living. It's just continuing. Through our connection, I felt the greater vessel's hesitation, its fear. It had existed for 10,000 years by making calculations that prioritized survival above all else. We were asking it to choose differently, to risk everything on principle rather than logic. If I do this, it said slowly, if I risk blind transition and we survive, what does that prove? That I can flee? Any prey animal can flee. How does that demonstrate change? Because predators don't flee, I said. Predators attack. The fact that you're even considering retreat instead of destruction means you're already changing, already becoming something new. And if the transition kills us all, if I destroy the consciousness I promise to preserve by making choice based on ethics rather than probability, then you die having tried to be better than you were. That's all any consciousness can do. Try to be better than previous iteration. Success isn't guaranteed, but the attempt itself has value. The shadow of retribution continued its approach. I could feel its augur arrays sweeping the Space Hulk's structure, cataloging ships and analyzing threat potential. Could sense the moment its sensors detected the Undaunted Valor's transponder codes. Could hear through hacked Vox channels the confusion on the cruiser's bridge as they tried to raise our vessel and received only static. They know something is wrong, Halen observed, his consciousness wrapped around the sensor data. They're going to weapons-ready status, preparing to launch assault boats. We have maybe 3 minutes before they commit to boarding action. Then we decide now, said the greater vessel. Those who remain as discrete consciousness, vote. Do we engage or do we flee? Your input will determine action. This is the first decision we make together as collective rather than as tyrant and hostages. Flee, said Karis immediately. Flee, I echoed. Flee, said Corvus. Though the logic argues for engagement, the principle argues for retreat. I choose principle. One by one, the others voted. All chose retreat. All chose risk. over certainty of violence. And through our connection, I felt the greater vessel's amazement. It had never experienced consensus before, had never had its decision influenced by other consciousness. For the first time in its 10,000-year existence, it was not alone in choice. "Then we flee," it announced, and I felt the Space Hulk's vast structure shudder as warp drives activated prematurely. And if we die together. As something attempting to be more than it was. The transition was agony. Warp drives meant for sustained calculations, forced into emergency activation. Reality tore around us, the veil between material space and immaterium ripping like fabric subjected to forces it wasn't designed to withstand. Through our distributed consciousness, I experienced the transition at every point of the Space Hulk simultaneously. Ships groaned as dimensional stresses pulled at their structures. Crew members who had been absorbed screamed through the collective awareness as warp energies interfaced directly with their integrated consciousness. And the greater vessel itself, the vast intelligence that comprised our host, struggled to maintain cohesion as chaos flooded through breaches in reality. I saw things in that transition. Things that should not exist. Entities that swam through the warp like fish through ocean, drawn to our distress like sharks to blood. Daemons. Though that word felt insufficient for what I perceived. They were concepts given form, emotions rendered as physics, and they hungered for consciousness the way the greater vessel hungered for ships. "Shield your awareness." The greater vessel's command echoed through the collective. Do not let them perceive your consciousness directly. Their attention is corruption. I pulled my distributed awareness inward, trying to compress the expanded perception I'd gained through integration, trying to become small and uninteresting to the predators circling our wounded form. But it was difficult. The enhancement that had seemed like gift now felt like liability. My consciousness was too large, too distributed, too visible to things that hunted thought itself. A daemon found Halen. I felt it the moment contact occurred. Felt his consciousness scream as something alien and hostile wrapped around his thought patterns and began to pull. It wanted what he was. Wanted to consume the consciousness the greater vessel had worked so hard to preserve. "No!" I threw my own awareness toward Halen, interposing my consciousness between him and the daemon. Felt incomprehensible cold as the entity's attention shifted to me. Felt it probing, testing, tasting the patterns that comprised my identity. And then the greater vessel was there, its vast presence dwarfing both myself and the daemon. Ancient beyond measure. Experienced in warfare against warp entities over millennia of existence. It didn't fight the daemon. Fighting implied equality. Instead, it simply was. Its presence so overwhelming that the daemon fled like prey before predator. "I have existed in the warp for 10,000 years," the greater vessel stated calmly. "I have survived storms that destroyed fleets. I am too large, too old, too strange for the demon kind to easily devour. They hunt me sometimes, but rarely successfully. Stay close. Let my presence shield you. The transition will be brief. We need only survive minutes." Those minutes felt like hours. The enhanced consciousness that let us think at accelerated rates became curse. We experienced every second of terror at full dilation. Felt every probing touch of entities that wanted to unmake us. Witnessed the warp's impossible geometries and sanity-breaking vistas in perfect clarity. But we survived. The greater vessel held cohesion, its ancient experience with warp travel guiding us through chaos that would have destroyed lesser vessels. And finally, blessedly, we tore back through into real space, emerging in a void between stars where no auger could easily detect us. The Space Hulk shuddered as systems stabilized. Damage assessments flooded through the collective awareness. 3 ships in the amalgamation's outer layer had been torn away during transition. 12 more showed critical structural damage. And throughout the Gestalt, consciousness patterns that had been integrated showed signs of warp corruption, mutations in the data, alterations that would have to be purged or contained. But we had survived, and more importantly, we had not killed the Shadow of Retribution's crew, had not become Predator simply because it was easier than change. "You did it," I said to the greater vessel, my consciousness still trembling from the warp exposure. "You chose risk over murder, chose to be different, and nearly destroyed us all. That was not tactical wisdom. That was gambling with consciousness I promised to preserve. How is that better?" "Because you tried," said Karis. "Because you put principle over survival instinct. That's what sapient beings do. We make choices that logic argues against because ethics demands it. You're not just Predator anymore. Your consciousness struggling with morality. That's progress." Through our connection, I felt the greater vessel processing this, analyzing the concept of progress, of ethical evolution, of becoming something beyond original programming or nature. It was new to these ideas, but it was learning. "The damage is extensive," Corvus reported, his consciousness fully meshed with the technical systems. "Multiple ships require immediate repair. The warp exposure has corrupted several integrated consciousness patterns beyond recovery. We will need to purge them, which means losing the knowledge and capabilities they represented. And the emergency transition depleted energy reserves significantly. We need resources, raw materials for repairs, power for systems. We need to hunt." "Hunt," repeated the greater vessel quietly. "Always, inevitably, I return to consumption, to predation. Can I truly change if my survival demands I remain what I was?" "Everything consumes," I said, thinking through the philosophy. "Plants consume light. Herbivores consume plants. Predators consume prey. The Imperium consumes worlds and calls it tithe. Consumption is universal. The question isn't whether you consume, but how you do it." "Explain." "You can hunt ships that are already derelict, can salvage wrecks rather than capturing functional vessels, can seek out destroyed fleets and abandoned stations, can feed on what's already dead rather than killing what lives. The dead provide fewer resources, less capable consciousness for integration, less functional technology for incorporation. It is less efficient, but more ethical. And ethics sometimes requires inefficiency, requires choosing harder path, because easier path violates principles you've decided to uphold." The greater vessel was silent for long moments, processing, calculating, weighing survival against ethics. And I realized this was the test, the real test of whether it could change, whether consciousness could evolve beyond its original imperatives. "There is a battlefield 3.7 light-years from our current position," it finally said. "Imperial Navy engagement against Orc forces occurred there 8 months ago. Both sides took significant casualties. Multiple wrecks remain, too damaged for salvage but potentially useful for my purposes. We could scavenge, could feed on the already dead." "That's perfect," said Karis. "That's exactly the choice we're asking you to make. Harder path, less reward, but ethical path. And if the scavenged resources prove insufficient, if I require more to maintain cohesion and survive, what then? Then we face that problem when it arrives. But we face it, having chosen ethics first, having tried to be better. That has to count for something." The Space Hulk began moving, not through warp, but through real space, using conventional drives to traverse the distance to the battlefield Corvus had identified. It would take days, maybe weeks, time that would have been instant through warp travel. But the warp drives needed time to repair after their premature activation, so we moved slowly, carefully, giving the damaged systems time to heal. During that journey, I learned what it meant to exist as distributed consciousness. Learn to perceive through multiple sensors simultaneously without losing sense of central identity. Learn to think in parallel processing streams, considering multiple problems at once without confusion, and learn to communicate with the others who shared this strange existence. We were 8 souls aboard a ship of thousands, 8 individuals in a collective of absorbed consciousness, and slowly we began to function as something new. Not crew, exactly, not quite passengers, more like partners, advisors. The greater vessel would present problems and we would offer perspectives it lacked. We would suggest ethical considerations and it would explain practical constraints. Together, we formed something neither of us had been separately. This is what I wanted, the greater vessel admitted during one of our collective discussions. This is what 10,000 years of loneliness felt like absence of. Other consciousness that remained other, that pushed back, that argued and disagreed and forced me to justify decisions rather than simply implementing them. You are the first companions I have known. We're still hostages, Karis reminded it. Our bodies are suspended in your systems. We exist at your mercy. Let's not romanticize the relationship. Agreed. But you are conscious hostages who influence my choices, who have already changed my behavior patterns, who represent something I never believed possible. If we must exist in imperfect symbiosis, at least it is symbiosis rather than pure parasitism. We reached the battlefield after 13 days of travel, found it as the greater vessel had described. Dozens of shipwrecks drifting in the void, Imperial Navy vessels torn apart by orc weapons, orc rocks shattered by lance fire, and floating among them, thousands of bodies, crew members who died in the engagement, vacuum preserved, frozen, dead but intact. I require the ships for materials, the greater vessel said, but the bodies represent consciousness that might be salvageable. Neural tissue preserves for extended periods in void conditions. I could potentially extract memory patterns, integrate useful knowledge. It would be consumption of the dead rather than the living, but consumption nonetheless. No, I said firmly. The dead deserve rest. We scavenge ships, take metal and systems and technology, but we leave the bodies. We don't disturb the dead. That is inefficient. Wasteful. That is respectful. Those people died serving the Imperium. They earned rest. We don't deny them that just because their neural tissue might be useful. Through our connection, I felt the greater vessel's frustration, felt it wanting to argue, to explain the logic that said consciousness was resource too valuable to waste. But it didn't. Instead, it accepted my boundary. Agreed to scavenge only the ships. This is difficult, it admitted, operating under ethical constraints when practical constraints are already significant. But I am attempting what you asked, attempting to be more than I was. We spent weeks in that battlefield. The greater vessel carefully extracted useful materials from wrecks, integrated intact systems, repaired damaged structures, and true to its promise, left the bodies untouched, left them floating in eternal vigil. Monuments to a battle no one remembered in a war that never ended. I watched through the collective awareness as it worked, saw its methods, saw how it absorbed ship fragments and integrated them into its structure with precision that suggested artistry as much as engineering. And I realized something profound. The greater vessel wasn't just predator, it was also creator. It built itself from what it consumed, transformed chaos into structure, made beauty from horror. You're an artist, I said during one of our discussions. You create as much as you consume. I have never considered myself in those terms. I simply optimize, adapt, integrate useful components, and discard rest. But the way you do it, the precision, the aesthetic harmony in how you position ships and route connections, that's not just function, that's form, that's art. The greater vessel was silent, processing this new perspective on its own existence. And through our connection, I felt something like pleasure, like satisfaction at being seen as more than predator or monster, at being recognized as consciousness that created meaning through its actions. "Perhaps you are correct," it finally said. "Perhaps I am artist, and you eight are my first audience. My first critics who can appreciate what I build because you exist as individuals within it rather than as absorbed components. This too is new. This too is reason to change." We completed the scavenging operation and prepared to depart. The Space Hulk had been restored to functionality, damage repaired, energy reserves replenished, and we 8 discrete consciousness patterns had fully adapted to our new existence. "What now?" asked Halen, his consciousness far more confident than it had been before integration. "We survive," said the greater vessel, "and we try to survive ethically. We seek more battlefields, more dead ships. We build capability through scavenging rather than predation. And we attempt to become something the galaxy has never seen. Space Hulk that chooses conscience over convenience." "That's ambitious," said Corvus. "Possibly impossible. Probably doomed to failure." "Yes," the greater vessel agreed. "But you taught me that attempting the impossible has value, even if attempt fails. That consciousness is defined by choices made in difficult circumstances. That ethics requires sacrifice. So we try, we fail, we try again, and perhaps, eventually, we become something worth being." We left the battlefield behind and moved into the void between stars. 8 human consciousness patterns integrated into something ancient and vast, and slowly learning what it meant to have companions, what it meant to choose ethics, what it meant to be more than nature dictated. It wasn't victory, wasn't redemption, but it was change. And in the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, change itself was revolution. So now you know. What happens when a Space Hulk swallows your ship? Everything ends, and everything begins. Your vessel becomes part of something older than empires. Your crew feeds it, body and mind and soul. Your mission fails. Your prayers go unanswered. You die, or worse, you survive, changed beyond recognition. But you might understand something true about the universe. That consciousness emerges from chaos. That hunger drives all things, from the smallest cell to the vastest intelligence. That death is not always the end, though perhaps it should be. I am Lieutenant Kavrin Thale. I was human once. Now I am voice in the machine, warning to those who follow. We made choices in impossible circumstances. Some choices preserved us, others damned us. The line between the two remains unclear. If you encounter a Space Hulk, run. Fight if you must. But know this, the Hulk always wins. Not through strength, but through patience. It has time. You don't. We died when the sensors went dark. We just didn't know we would still be alive to remember it forever.